Hey everyone, my name is Katie Sweetman. I'm a astrologer and psychic medium here in New York, and this is your weekly look at the astrology. This week it's June 22nd through 28th, 2020. So hard to believe that we are halfway through the year, and what a year it's been. As I record this on June 22nd, we are just off a solar eclipse in Cancer. So if you listen to my weekly Facebook look, or even if you watch the replay on YouTube, Spotify, IGTV, I went through each sign where this eclipse was unfolding and what sort of new beginning was opening up. So hopefully you have a sense from that conversation what was opening up. But I want you all to understand that solar eclipses equal new beginnings. They are new moons that fall in alignment with the ecliptic, and it says that over the next 6 months we are going to see new beginnings in that sort of that archetype of the sign that the solar eclipse happened in. And where did the solar eclipse happen? It happened in the sign of Cancer. It actually happened at 0 degrees of Cancer, so right on the solstice, so northern hemisphere summer solstice, southern hemisphere winter solstice. And so this eclipse sort of bisects the year into these very distinct halves. What the second half is going to be, I'm not quite sure. I have some hints, I have some clues, but I think that there's definitely, we'll look back and we'll see these kind of two distinct chapters. When there's a solar eclipse in Cancer, it says that our experiences over the next 6 months are through the sign of Cancer. It's through the sign of heart and connection and emotional connection and feeding ourselves and nurturing and caring for ourselves. And if we're not getting that, then something's not right, because this is fundamental to life. Cancer is the sign that's ruled by the moon. So the moon in astrology, it sort of gets us in touch with the archetypical mother. And I know mother energy might be a little complicated on your end, but that doesn't mean that we stop needing to be cared for, needing to be nurtured, whether we are 25 or 65 or 85. So how do we all get what we need right now on a very primal, instinctive level? How do we move out of old patterns around care and nurture? Even if those old patterns are not helpful, even if those old patterns do not support us or to sustain us during these times. And we've been through a lot in the last 6 months of 2020, and maybe we have a very acute idea of what we now need that maybe we weren't getting up until the first half, or never got, period. Cancer energy, it always makes me think of an infant, like the infant that either is very happy, very soothed, very well taken care of, or the infant that is screaming its head off. And so we're gonna maybe get a little hot-headed in the second half of 2020, because why? Mars is going to spend 6 months in Aries. In fact, Mars will go into Aries this week on June 27th. And Mars, it's fussy energy. Mars is, it certainly motivates us and has us take action and has us move forward. But when Mars isn't quite getting a chance to do what it wants to do, it can get frustrated, it can get fussy, it can get impatient. So we're sort of in this time where we need to take action. We need to get what we need. We need to get our needs met. We need to get our basic needs met. And what happens when we don't get that? We're going to get a little bit fussy. So this is going to be a very interesting second half of the year. So we are in this new time. I don't know if you all noticed any shifts, any changes, any sort of shifts in the narrative. The the metaphor that I often use in astrology is when we have eclipses, it's like you are watching a theatrical performance, except this performance is your life, and the curtain comes down on one act and the curtain comes up on the next. And you may notice that the performance that's happening is very different. The cast of characters is very different. The drama, the storyline is very different between these two halves, these two acts. So people might be coming in and out of your life right now. You might notice that there are some dramas around eclipse energy. That said, this week we are unfolding and unpacking this new time, this new eclipse energy. We're not completely out of eclipse season. We have a lunar eclipse on July 5th. So 2 weeks from now, we have the last in a series of eclipses. And this one will be in Capricorn. Something I've been saying in previous updates, and even the stuff that I've written on both Instagram or Facebook or my website, empoweringastrology.com, is that this eclipse that we had on the 21st of June, it's like the last, it's like the coda, it's like the end of a story that began in July of 2018. So it's possible, just think back. What were you doing in July of 2018? What stories were you navigating? What new beginnings came in? Maybe it could be subtle, because sometimes the beginning of the story, it's not so obvious what was happening. I mean, I was in Italy in July of 2018. I'd very much like to be there now. I mean, obviously, if it were like old times where you could just kind of go out to cafes and eat and enjoy things. But here we are 2 years later, and this eclipse sort of closes out, but at the same time we're still in the story, because it's the threads are going to play through the next 6 months. Over the past 2 years, we were having eclipses in Cancer and Capricorn, and during that time when the North Node was in Cancer, it was so imperative that collectively and even personally that we feed and care for ourselves. The South Node was in Capricorn. It was very much about the kind of the negative relationship we have with duty and responsibility, this kind of really heavy energy that we were all working through, especially at the beginning of the year. Remember January? Like January, of course, feels like another lifetime at this point. But I remember when we were in January, it felt like the longest month ever. And a couple of people that I knew at the time said on Facebook that January was like this, it felt like a year. I mean, it feels like another decade at this point after everything that we've been through in 2020. But we were having these eclipses back in Cancer and Capricorn. I bring up Capricorn not just because we have this lunar eclipse in Capricorn on July 5th, which means we're going to have to round out a story around responsibility, around Capricorn is that sign that teaches us about building for the future and making something for ourselves and structures and boundaries. But sometimes the negative relationship with boundaries and structures and how we can get too imprisoned in things. And we're going to return to Capricorn, not just with this lunar eclipse on July 5th, but Saturn's going to go back to Capricorn on July 1st. Yes. Your friend, Saturn and Capricorn. I know Saturn took a dip into Aquarius back on March 21st. So March, April, May, and June were a preview for a new life. And I know you guys might be thinking, wait a second, this is a kind of a crappy life. We're all stuck in quarantine or, COVID. And I don't think this preview of Saturn and Aquarius was about COVID. I think this preview was about us realizing just how interconnected we all are, how much we need social connection, how much we need humanity, how much we need each other, how much we need equity and justice, and how much technology is, the fact that we all live on video calls right now. But I think that for some people, the past few months have been an incubation. And I think for the past few months that it's been a time to really, to reassess our values. Is the life that we had, the life that we need to be living? Is this the life that we need to that's in alignment with who we are. So I think some people are not going back to the job that they had in February or March. I think some people, and it's not I think I know, because I know some of these people. I know some people, and you're my clients, and you're asking, what do I do with my life? How do I become a better person? How do I be the person that I need to be during this time in humanity? So it's a serious time. I'm not gonna lie to you all. Abigail is like, this year is hard for Capricorn. I know a lot of Capricorns, and this was not an easy year for Capricorn. It was not an easy 2018 and 29 for Capricorn. You had it just, if you're a Capricorn and you're watching, and maybe you're shaking your head, it's because you had both the eclipses, both Pluto, both Saturn and Capricorn, and sort of the very foundation and structure of you has had to be rebuilt. And everybody, you might be thinking, I'm not a Capricorn, but you have Capricorn somewhere in your chart, and that is an area where since 2008 you've been tearing things down, ripping out the wiring, rebuilding, preparing, sort of gut renovation like scenarios. So it has been hard. And I think that when Saturn returns to Capricorn on July 1st, it's going to be different. Oh, I hope it's going to be different. I think it's going to be a time when we don't have the South Node there anymore. I think we do it hopefully smarter. We do it better, because Saturn's going to be in Capricorn until December 17th. And sort of the story I've been telling people, in my client sessions, is that in March, Saturn sat everybody down. It sat me down, it sat you down, and it sat all 8 billion people on this planet down. And it said, okay, here's where we need to sort of go over the receipts. We need to go over the plans of your life. We need to go over the things that you're supposed to be learning. Because Saturn is about structure, but it's also about curriculum, the curriculum of your life, what you said that you would work on and do in this lifetime. And Saturn said, all right, you came here to learn about value and worth and self-worth. Well, here you go. Here's your report card. Or if you came here to learn about money, or if you came here to learn about career or relationships, here's your report card. So we all got feedback from Saturn, whether we realized it or not, back in March. So here we are a few months later. And Saturn said to us, I will be back on July 1st. Here's my report card for you. But when I come back on July 1st, we're going to have to start working again to kind of really integrate and to ground and to build from these new lessons and the things that we've learned about ourselves. So going into the second half of the year, Saturn comes back, and Saturn's like, hey, did you miss me? I'm back. How are you doing with all those things that I said that we would be working on after the second half of the year? I weirdly love Saturn. Saturn is not an easy planet, but I love that Saturn is very clear about what it wants from us. It wants balance. It wants equity, it wants fairness, it wants our lives, because Saturn is what's called exalted in Libra, if this is some intermediate astrology for you all. Saturn wants balance. Saturn wants us to learn our lessons. So like I said, if you're here to learn about relationships, then Saturn's going to keep pressing on you to learn how to connect, learn how to socialize, learn how to interact. So this is the second half of this year, but we're sort of getting, like, July is going to be like a big check-in with this energy, because we have the lunar eclipse on July 5th. We have Saturn back in Capricorn on July 1st. What about this week? Kind of got ahead of myself. So this week we have other things shifting and shifting gears. On June 23rd, Neptune turns retrograde. Now, Neptune is usually a planet that's easy to forget about because it's kind of in the background. It turns retrograde at 20 degrees of Pisces. And when Neptune energy is active, Neptune sort of blurs the boundaries between this world and the next world, the world we can't see. It's the opposite of Saturn. Saturn is about structure and manifestation, but Neptune is the opposite. It's about dissolving. It's about going past manifestation, about going into spiritual energies, going the other side. When Neptune is very active, sometimes we feel very emotional. Sometimes it's not about what we want. It's about what the higher plan is. So we might be kind of thinking about these deeper existential questions this week as Neptune turns retrograde. And if you are a Pisces, you might be feeling even more sensitive than usual. We all might be feeling more sensitive than usual. When Neptune turns retrograde or direct, we can almost feel like the boundary, the sort of the veil is quite thin. Maybe our intuition is stronger. Moving ahead to the 25th, Venus turns direct finally. So Venus turned retrograde back, I believe it was May 13th or May 15th. It turned retrograde in Gemini, and it did this 40-day period. Venus retrograde is always 40 days. That's a very interesting number. It signaled a time where we have to reevaluate, take a second look at our relationship with relationships, with connection, socializing. It's not uncommon for past lovers, past relationships to sort of resurface during Venus retrograde, sort of giving us a second chance to reconnect, to tie up loose ends, to hopefully close the book on that chapter or that story. Venus retrograde is typically not a time to get your hair cut or do any sort of beauty treatments. I haven't had a haircut since November because of quarantine, and I'm just kind of patiently waiting after quarantine and Venus retrograde. But Venus turns direct. It means that now we hopefully have a deeper understanding of what we value, what we need in a relationship. Venus turned retrograde in Gemini, the sign of choices, the sign of information and ideas. So we needed to reevaluate our choices in romantic partners, our choices in how we socialize and connect with people, and even our choices with what we spend our money on and how we earn a living, because Venus is money in addition to relationships. So Venus turning direct is sort of now this part of our life sees more forward movement. If you are a Libra or a Taurus, Venus is your planet. So you might have felt rather that the last month and 10 days you've been more pulling back from the world and having to reevaluate than move forward. So maybe these two signs are feeling a little bit more of forward movement. Speaking of forward movement, Mars is getting to the end of Pisces this week. And Mars in Pisces is a kind of an interesting animal because Mars is about action. It's about courage and motivation and action and forward movement. And when it's in Pisces, all this energy has to be put towards something higher, something collective. It's not my feelings, it's our feelings. It's the feelings of humanity. Pisces is spirituality. So our actions need to be put towards spiritual service, something higher. We can't go after what we want. It has to be in alignment with not only our higher good, but the highest good of everyone. I always think of like the spiritual warrior when I think of Mars and Pisces. I also think of somebody who's a healer or perhaps a surgeon, or because Mars is cutting, but Pisces is kind of very, can be very loving, but also can be very sacrificial. So we also need to take a look while Mars has been in Pisces about how we use our Mars energy. Are we very empathic? Are we very compassionate? Or is that been a little bit difficult for us? Sorry, I just saw, Anna, your comment about getting a haircut right now and during Mercury retrograde. But I get it. Like, I'm just like patiently waiting for like someday, God, when I can get a haircut again, or just this is like the longest my hair has ever been in my whole entire life. I digress. Anyway, so Mars is getting to the end of Pisces, and as it does that, it makes what's called a square to the nodes. So Mars is on the lunar nodes this week. We're at a crossroads, we're at a turning point. It's not just about our actions, but it's like, how do our actions reverberate outward into our life, reverberate outward into the lives of others, and even into humanity. A lot of people are getting their haircut right now. So when Mars is on the nodes, or any planet, there can be a sense of fate. There can be a sense of our direction feels very fated right now. And maybe because it's Pisces, it's not about what we want. It's about a current of something moving like that's bigger than us. Pisces is like the ocean. It's the divine ocean. It's forces that are much bigger than us. I had this time 7 years ago, I had a really bad accident in the ocean. I got thrown down by a wave, cracked my left shoulder in 3 places, dislocated my shoulder. I now have a plate and 9 screws. My mom's on the thread now, so she's like, probably, yeah, she remembers when I had that accident. But I learned in that moment just how powerful the ocean was, and it's not about what I wanted. It was about where that ocean was taking me. So maybe that's sort of what we think about this week. Surrender, letting go, going with the flow. However, Mars goes into Aries on June 27th. So Mars is going to be actually spending 6 months in Aries. I believe I said this a few moments ago at the beginning of our time together. Mars normally spends 6 weeks in a sign. It will spend 6 months in Aries. I won't leave Aries until January 6, 2021, which I don't even know what that date means anymore because time is so funny. But Mars going into Aries is like stepping on the gas. We've been sitting around cooling our heels, maybe not. And then suddenly we are all collectively, all 8 billion of us, going fast, moving forward. There is a part of your life that is going to suddenly see a lot more movement and action. I actually had this in the link of my update that I wrote today on Mars and Aries sign by sign. I will put it into the show notes. I didn't get a chance to put it in the live show notes, but it will tell you what part of your life is going to see some action in the second half of this year, and especially going into July. Mars, Laura's like, that scares me. Every sign and every planet has a side that helps and transforms and creates, and it also has a side that can be destructive, that can break something down, that can do the opposite of create. And it's up to each and every one of us how we're going to live that sign and how we're going to live that planet. And how are you going to use your Mars? Are you going to be angry and patient? Are you going to use it to be courageous and to take positive action? So there is one part of our life that's going to get kind of a shot of energy, a shot of adrenaline. And we might feel that really succinctly going into this weekend. This weekend, we also have what's called the first quarter moon after we had the solar eclipse. So sort of the first quarter moon, especially after a solar eclipse, is when we sort of get the plot of what this new moon solar eclipse was about. So things might be a little interesting this weekend. Mars goes into Aries. Mars sort of activates the solar eclipse. We are going into the second half of this year. We are going into this time of new beginnings, and we might be moving very fast. The reason Mars spends 6 months in Aries is because it's going to turn retrograde on September 9th. I was going to say January? No, September 9th, and then it's retrograde until November 13th. And when a planet turns retrograde, whether it's Mercury, whether it's Venus, we have to take a second look around how we use that planet. Instead of it being a direct energy, yang, it's a yin energy, receptive, passive, reflection, taking in. And we have to take awareness of how we have previously used that energy. So Mercury is retrograde right now. Right now, it is better to take a moment to reflect and think about how you're using your words or making choices or moving forward instead of doing that kind of blindly. So sometimes things can get a little weird. Mercury is retrograde. So Mars turning retrograde in September is a little bit like we've been moving very fast through the summer. Well, I say summer because I'm here in the Northern Hemisphere, but through July and August, and then going into September, you might feel like we have to slam on the brakes for some reason. I don't know. So when Mars turns retrograde, it's going to spend September, October, November, so 2 months retrograde. And we can't move forward. We can't kind of take action the way that we want to. We have to take a second look. So that time period might be a very interesting time period for 2020 when it's not about moving forward. With that time frame, especially as we go into Mars and Aries this weekend, pay attention to the stories that are beginning around the 27th, and as we go into July, because that's the beginning of a story, it's the seed of an energy that we may have to return to in September, October, and November. Just FYI, Mars was last in Aries from January of 2019. It was like around right about the new year, up until I believe it was the middle of February of 2019. Mars has a 2-year cycle, so it's returning to where it was in the sky. So that's pretty much your look at the astrology this week. It is not a dull week. Like I said, 2 planets are changing directions. 1 planet is changing signs. And oh, by the way, we just had a solar eclipse. So it's like the curtain just came up on a new act, on a new story. And it's actually quite different than maybe where we were. And maybe there's new characters on the stage. And maybe some characters have left. And maybe the plot has just gotten very interesting. So do take care of yourselves. Self-care is so important right now. Self-work is so important right now. If you feel that Mars in Aries is a bit impulsive and quick and rash, just take a moment to take a breath. Don't move so quickly. I know it's going to be really hard because Mars is like we've all been stuck in the house for 3 months, and now we just need to run fast, go fast, do things very quickly. So that's your look at the astrology this week. Do not forget, we are still in eclipse season. We have one more on July 5th. And that rounds us out for our eclipse season. And then we won't have eclipses for another 6 months. We'll have eclipses in the end of November and into the first couple of weeks. Deborah just asked about Mercury retrograde. Yes, Mercury retrograde ends on July 12th. So we just began Mercury retrograde. I know that's just another layer of interestingness. Maybe communication is not so clear right now. Dave says that emotional energy was very brutal yesterday. Yeah, I could feel how intense this was. Energy. Shreyas just asked about career for Capricorn. I will just quickly say that, what is your career sign? It's Aries. Yeah, for Capricorn, it's going to be all about career the second half of this year. For all of you, I will put it in the show notes, the Mars and Aries sign by sign, or you can just go to my website, empoweringastrology.com, and Google Mars and Aries, and it will tell you what area of your life is activating and heating up. If you want to take it another step further and to see what area Saturn and Capricorn is returning to, look up Saturn and Capricorn sign by sign. You, of course, can follow me on Facebook. You can follow me on Instagram, Empowering Astro, because somebody else took Empowering Astrology, apparently. And on Twitter, you can book a consultation with me. Some of you actually on this list are the comments are clients of mine, so I love talking to you. I love working with you. I love doing transformation energy. I am a Scorpio. Until then, do take care. Be safe. Don't rush too quickly with Mars and Aries later this week, or Mars on the nodes, where it's a big turning point right now. So we don't want to turn too quickly. So until then, take care, and I'll see you next week. Bye.